Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight we're doing live streaming. This is episode number 4. This is Brian's Redemption
The
Tour,
Redemption Tour.
which we're very excited to offer him this time.
Yes. Thank you for doing that, Matt. Boy, that first one was rough.
Happy to help with that. That's easy. So just want to remind everyone that if you want to go back and watch the past streams, you can do that. You can go and watch an hour and 45 minutes of Alex Lafkas last week tying up streamers, modern White River deceivers, and he answers a ton of questions from the crowd. It's really good. So, but take some time. You might want to fast forward if you're going to tie. So, big reminder there that these become available 24 hours roughly after we finish the stream, and you just click on the live stream playlist and you're ready to rock, which is great. So, take this second if you have not done so yet. Please think about hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell down there. That really helps us out. It kind of pops our videos up so more people can find these and tie these cool flies with all these great tires we're able to bring in here in northern Michigan. Other thing too is maybe hit the thumbs up button. That helps us out as well. But with all that gone, real excited to bring in Brian tonight. He's our owner at the Northern Angler, and he's been a guide for few decades.
5 years, yeah.
Fresh off of fall steelhead season. I think you just
And in the middle of holiday season. It's been fun.
You ran your last trip, a week or two ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's time to start thinking about spring, filling up the steelhead boxes. That's kind of the direction we're going tonight. So he's going to be tying 2 steelhead nymphs. In between, we're going to go to this chat window and answer some questions. If you haven't done so, if you're not on the app and you're on your phone, you might not be able to see the chat window. So think about getting an app for your phones. Otherwise, put your questions right in the chat window and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Let's strap in and let's tie some flies.
Let's do it.
Should be fun. We're gonna switch over.
Let's do it. So tonight I'm going to be tying a steelhead nymph, and this is a very simple steelhead stone. And this is a primary diet for the fish. You start seeing them crawling around in the snow February, March, April. On those warm winter days, you'll see those flies crawling around. That is a good time to throw this little simple stone. And a lot of times I'll fish 2 flies if it's legal there. I might put an egg in front of this closer to the weight, and then this stone fly in the back. But this is a great pattern. Don't be afraid to fish this in high water. It's amazing when you have high water and good visibility, the size flies that you can go with. You don't have to always go super big. This is a very good pattern in most water conditions for the spring, late winter, into spring, all the way into May, depending on the river that you fish. But this, like any fly that I tie, these are going to be flies that are simple. I'm not going to add a lot of additional steps to them, because when I sit down and tie these, I'm going to tie 50 or 100 of them. I need to fill my box, and I don't have a lot of time. Yeah, I have all winter, but between running the shop and trying to get ready for guide season, you run out of time. So and if I go through a bunch, I can still sit down in the evening after I get off the river and tie some of these up. So the hook I like to use for this simple stone is just a Tiemco 3761. It's a nice strong nymph hook. And I'm just going to take that thread back. I'm going to just coat the hook lightly. It doesn't need to be heavily coated. Just enough to secure that thread. Taking it back to about the barb of the hook. Simple stonefly. This is one of my go-to patterns. It's super fishy, and I'm just going to start with a hen saddle. So a lot of times this is a basis for many of my stonefly nymphs. So just like a simple hen saddle like this, you can use these for soft tackles. These are great for, this is almost a variation of a sparrow fly by Jack Garside. So very, very easy to tie. I'm going to take one side of the feather, and I'm going to kind of just separate these out. But I'm going to take this one side, and this is going to become the tail of my stonefly. If you wanted to get fancy with this, you could split biots, goose biots on here, and give it that split tail to give it maybe a little bit more polished look. But most of the time, this is going to end up in the fish or on the bottom of the river, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I want a good representation of what that stonefly is going to look like. So I'm just going to take this side of the marabou tail, and I'm just going to tie this in right at the bend of the hook, and I'm going to just kind of work that so it still looks buggy, and kind of take that back a little. I'm going to, like, that looks pretty good. Got one kind of sticking up there, but just a little bit of bugginess coming off that back end. And then I like to kick my vise up here to dub so I don't catch my thread on that hook. And I'm just going to take some of this Fly Fish Foods Bruiser Blend. You can use any type of black fur that you like. I like this because it has a little bit of this sparkle in it. And I'm just going to kind of lightly dub this body. And I don't use dubbing wax or anything like that. I'm just going to kind of work this onto my thread. And I'm going to slowly start to wrap this forward. And that's about all I want as far as the diameter of my body. I kind of want this part to be thin. And I'm going to take it up, a little over halfway up to the hook shank. And I'm going to go ahead, that's going to just be the back body of my fly. And then I'm going to tie in some peacock herl. And this is going to be my thorax or my wing casing for this stonefly. And I'm just going to take a clump of this, about like that. And I can get, several wing casings out of one clump. So I'm just going to tie this in, and it's okay to have that forward a little bit because I want that extra peacock herl in there to help build up that body a little bit, because I'm going to have that thorax of the fly be a little bit larger diameter than the regular part of the body of the fly. If you look at stoneflies, especially those early black stones, they have a very, very thin body. And I honestly think kind of the thinner the better, the smaller the better on these. Those fish can it's amazing what they can see in those spring flows. So this is going to just be my wing casing. I'm just going to have that set back. Then I'm going to take the tip of this hen saddle feather that I stripped off the end for my legs, and I'm just going to peel the tips back, and I'm just going to tie this in by the tip, and I just lay it right on top of my hook, a couple of wraps there, and snip it off. That's going to hold it right in place for me. And then I'm going to take more dubbing, and I'm going to build this up towards the head, but I want to leave enough space so that I'm going to bring the peacock herl up and over. It's going to lay flat and I don't overcrowd my eye. It's really easy to overcrowd your eye on this, any fly, right? We all have a tendency to do that. So I'm going to take a little bit more of this fur blended dubbing. I'm going to just add it to my thread. Again, I just twist it on there. You could get fancy and do like a dubbing loop and all that, but again, these are guide flies. These are flies that I need to sit down and fill my box with, right? Like, that's the whole idea. I'm just going to wrap this forward, and I just kind of loosely wrap that, let it build up a little bit of that body, and kind of see where that is. And I can pull that hair back, and that looks pretty good. You can see that has a nice profile here. It's going to be a nice overlay for these legs for the stonefly. So if you look at stoneflies, they have all those creepy crawly legs on the front, and I use this, the tips of this hen saddle to simulate those legs. So I'm just going to wrap this away from me, and I'm going to give this about 2.5, 3 wraps, and I really don't care how this splays. Like, I want it to be webby. I want that to look really buggy, to kind of stick out so the fish see that the profile of those legs. So I'm going to just wet my fingers and kind of pull this back a little, and I'm going to just push these legs back slightly without wrapping too tightly, and you can see it kind of gives it that flare back with still giving that profile of nice webby looking legs. Now here you could trim the top of those feathers off. A lot of times I'll just take the peacock herl and spread it so the tips of these feathers don't stick up through it, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to take this forward, kind of pull these tight, stroke those feathers back a little bit, And I'm just going to give this a couple of wraps right here on the front. And if you don't tie it with Peacock, you need to, because Peacock somehow has some sort of magical fish catching ability. If you think about all the different flies that are tied with Peacock Herl, they're all really successful. So whenever possible, I like to add Peacock Herl to my darker flies, my stone flies. There's lots of different variations that you can do with this, but that Peacock really does look super, super good. And I'm going to just trim this off, and I'm going to save this little clump for later. I'm going to set that right off to the side, and then I'm just going to finish this head. So I'm just going to stroke those feathers back a little bit, and I'm going to give it a few thread wraps. I don't really care about that additional peacock right at the very front of the eye. If I do, I'll just kind of pull that back just a little bit, add a couple more turns, and that is it. I mean, if you look at that profile, I don't know if you can see that, but you have the wing casing. This is almost like a version of a teeny nymph, if you remember those, but just a very, very simple stonefly with a lot of this flash in the body, very realistic in the water. I like how the hen saddle really moves, makes it look super lifelike. I can sit down, tie up a ton of these, and really get myself going for my spring steelhead box. Just give it a couple whip finishes, and you're on to the next. So this, like I said, great pattern to add to your arsenal. Super simple to tie, very easy steps. A beginner can tie this. You know, a lot of guys are like, oh, you know, I steelhead fish, but I don't tie a lot of flies. These are super simple. I mean, gosh, if you look at that, it does have a nice webby profile. You look at like the top of it, like the stonefly. Definitely a fly that I have 100% confidence in all late winter, spring for the steelhead. And brown trout like them too. You can get up on the upper and you can nymph these up whenever you get those early black stones coming off. And I'll tie these sometimes as large as a 6, but mostly the majority of these are going to be size 8 and size 10. So we have any questions, Matt? Let me tie up another one here while we're kind of chilling out
here. Welcome everyone. We have a lot of people to welcome here. We got 45, 46 people tuned in tonight.
Wow, that's awesome.
We weren't
for a
sure
Wednesday
with
night.
The holiday, you know, coming up. But thanks for tuning in, everyone. Even Bacon is tuned in. With
Shut up with his new haircut.
I wish we could put up a picture of him. I bet I could.
Oh, we should.
Ooh, that'd be embarrassing.
That would be super fun.
So we go through real quick. I mean, these are not weighted stones. I know there's guys that tie really weighted stones, and you know,
if you wanted to fish these,
what technique does this fit? You know,
so if you wanted to fish these under an indicator, you might want to add a bead head to it, or maybe add a little bit of lead to the fly itself. This is really something that I'm going to use for drift fishing in the spring in the high water. But you can definitely add weight to this. You can take this variation of my simple stone and add different colors to the body. You could add like more green to it. You know, there's lots and lots of different things that you can do to this fly. This is just my particular, like, fill my box, make it super simple. You know, if you wanted to add rubber legs to it off the side, if you wanted to add some epoxy over the back, that would look really, really sweet. You know, and sometimes I'll make these with a flashback and use flash instead of Peacock Herl, but more often than not, I'm using Peacock Herl just because I like that fish catching ability. Yeah. So, yeah, just simple.
I hope that
tie
answers
in
Kurt's question. I know he asked about the weighted stones.
the weighted stones. Yeah.
Maybe you could talk real quick about expected water conditions in the spring. What kind of changes do you see that go throughout the spring, and how do you adjust to that? Maybe?
You know, that's a good way to think about things, Matt. So in the springtime, you know, we start off with fairly low and clear water. Before we get our major melt, we get those steelhead that start coming in, or you know, steelhead that in our rivers that are maybe have been in for a long time in the fall. Those first few warm days in the spring, they will really hit the gravel, and they're ready to go. They're going to be the first ones to spawn, and the snow starts to melt, and then you start to get really high water conditions, dark, dirty water, and those always provide a challenge. I think more mentally than for the fish, because the fish can see things. If you think about a lot of their native streams that these fish live in, it's kind of a glacial till, really kind of dark water, but still has that visibility. And ideally, that's what we want with our spring conditions, is still to have some visibility. So again, I just made my body. I'm going to wrap this. I'm going to take my Peacock Hurl wing casing, and I'm just going to maybe clean up the tips of this from my last cut. And I'm just going to tie that in. And again, just the tip of that feather, which I've already kind of prepped here. We're talking, tie that in, a couple wraps, wing casing, and you're good to go. Again, these are simple guide patterns, and something that I want to see where that's going to wrap. So I kind of sometimes will set it up where the feather comes across the body like this, so when I start to wrap it forward, those legs have a tendency to slide back without adding a thread to push them back. So I add just a little bit of dubbing here to the front of that. Again, thanks for tuning in. This is something fun that's new for us, and we hope it's fun and educational for you guys. We're not total tech geeks here. We just want to share a little bit of what we know about fishing and keep you guys engaged and give you maybe some new ideas to tie for the winter. Maybe a little bit of inspiration. I know sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get inspired to tie, right? We all kind of get in those winter doldrums like, oh, there's nothing to do. Gosh, after quarantine, I feel like I've seen everything on Netflix, so it's time to really get busy and tie. So I'm just going to moisten my fingers, and I'm going to push this back a little bit. I'm going to create a little bit of space up here in order to give me a room to tie in that Peacock Hurl wing casing. So that's what it looks like before I pull this hackle forward, or this wing case forward. And I see I have one that's kind of the straggler. That's kind of the cool thing about this Peacock Hurl, is if you get that and you're like, oh, I don't like that, I can just kind of pop that right off of there. And it's usually going to break right at the thread. Of course, this one didn't. Just like that. And that just looks like a steelhead catching bug right there. And like I said, I'll start fishing this very much in February, March, and April. Probably one of my #1 flies in the spring. Between that and like maybe an little salmon fry pattern, and the next fly that I'm going to tie is a green caddis. Just super simple.
Real quick, Brian,
you can tie these
got
up.
one or two more questions before
Sure.
you move on to the next fly. First off, from Benjamin, why do you think peacock feathers work so well?
Benjamin, that's a great question. I've thought about this quite a bit. And if you look at a peacock hurl in and of itself, it has so much natural color, right? A lot of the synthetics that we make today, I think, try and emulate this, lots of different color facets coming off of each individual feather.
Iridescent.
Yeah, definitely iridescent, a little bit of that natural sparkle. So I think that's, probably the #1 reason why Peacock Hurl is so popular with the fish is it kind of gives it that natural hue. It's not super stark like a full synthetic. And it's fun to go dig around for insects on the river. You know, you can kind of see what the little stonefly nymphs look like. You kind of look at that and say, oh, well, that looks nice. You know, you could do lots of different things for your thorax, but like I said, peacock herl is my favorite. Yeah, thanks for the question, Ben.
Okay, I have a fun one that I'm going to ask. How many stoneflies would you randomly guess? I mean, just guesstimate you go through in the spring.
Oh my gosh. Depends on the spring, but I would say probably 200 easily. Yeah, probably 200 would be a good start for these. You know, get a couple hundred packs, sit down, and it's not hard to just whip through these flies. It's
no, and they get better, and you get way more consistent every
right,
time.
absolutely. You know, your first fly is never as good as the last fly that you tie.
No, gosh, no.
Yeah, you know,
catches fish just the same.
Right.
Absolutely.
Lee asks, I'm gonna change Lee's question because you sort of answered it a little bit, but if you had to pick a different color to do in a stonefly,
oh yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, you could add a hot spot to this. Like I said, you may do like a green body. You could do a brown body just as well. You could do this absolutely with brown, very, very easily. In fact, you know, we could whip one up, but I don't know where that other hen saddle went. But I definitely will do this in brown hues, and use a dark brown speckled hen for that. So yeah, get crazy with the colors.
What do you usually put in your box?
I put mainly
Ask Kurt.
8s and 10s. Sometimes I'll do this in a 6 if I feel like the water's really high, and I might build that body up a little bit more. More of a confidence thing, I think, than a fish catching thing.
Sure. Peter asks, and it's funny because I already worked through the template of a video for this, kind of talking about what flies when and where, but he asks if you, and again, I tend to modify these questions a little bit, but do you just fish this on a gravelly bottom, or do you find them working throughout the system?
Oh no, these work throughout the system. That's a great question. And if you catch sticks and things like that are on the bottom, which you will, you'll find big stonefly nymphs in loggy areas. That's where most of them are. So where you have log, big stones, things like that, that's where the stonefly nymphs are going to be in. So I always look for woody debris, and with some gravel for sure. But they do work in those woody debris sandy runs too, because you think these things are all the way through the system. So it just tends to work pretty much river wide. And that's probably a reason why I have so much success with it, because you really don't have to consider that. You don't have to think like, oh, I can't fish this particular fly here. You know, like maybe more of a hex nymph, I might tend to fish in slower, deeper, sandier water, kind of more what I would call winter water, resting pools and things like that, where these fish stop over and they're looking for a little bit bigger meal. That's maybe where I would put a hex on. The stonefly, they can eat so many of these, and they're so readily available for them. They'll move pretty quickly and take these. So it's kind of throughout the whole system.
And they can be a big chunk of protein.
Absolutely,
for those fish
some
too.
of those stoneflies are like that big.
I like what you said about not just in we think of stoneflies as a gravel, rocky bottom insect,
right.
But just like a lot of insects, they have this thing called behavioral drift, where they, kind of release and move down through the system
crawlers, so they're crawling
to repopulate the river. Exactly.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of the cycle. We see bugs fly upstream, hatch, live in their stream, and then release down to repopulate. So
absolutely. And, don't be afraid to throw really big stoneflies. I like these, particularly in the time frame that I fish this size the most, because I see that stonefly activity. You see those stoneflies popping up in the afternoon, so those nymphs are swimming around, right? Like they have to be around, and that's usually when this works the best. So yeah, get creative with different colors. Like just that whole profile. It's fishy, it's buggy, and it works. It's super super simple. Um, you know, I like to tie flies, but it's a chore. I mean, it's part of my job. Like you have to sit down and tie flies. You go broke trying to buy all these. And plus, you know, you have your own little twist to them. I think it's all part of the process. Is tying your own flies, filling up your own steelhead box, and you know, it's a lot of fun. Kind of gets you psyched up for spring. I know it does me. Especially you get those long winter days and you're just super excited to get out. Might as well tie. Next best thing to fishing.
We had one last question from
Sure.
John, which I can jump in there too. He asked, when to use weighted nymphs, and I think and type of water, and I think that's, you know, it's a good question, and it's really about matching your water type.
Absolutely.
I mean, and how you're fishing more. I think it's your technique probably more than anything.
If I'm fishing a floating line, more often than not, I'm going to use a weighted fly. You know, where it's permittable. You know, it just helps that fly to stay deeper into the water column. You know, those fish that are feeding, a lot of times they're not right on the bottom, so that's okay. And the spring water flows, it's okay to have a little bit of weight in there to kind of, you know, keep that fly in front of the fish longer. It definitely helps maybe to add a little bit of weight to it. Yeah.
Do you want to tie another, or do you want to move on to the next one?
I can tie another one.
You can finish
kind of
that
just
one.
chatting and tying. You know, you kind of get into a groove, and you know, it's like I said, it's just you can sit here and just, you know, whip off a bunch of flies. They're super buggy. You know, I like that little tufted tail. You know, it's kind of like mini marabou almost. Like I said, if you wanted to, you could split that tail up. Super easy to do so. You know, just add a little bit of dubbing for the body. Move that forward. You know, you can see how quickly, once you get into a groove with this pattern, how quickly you could fill a box. Literally, I mean, people are like, oh, you tie 100 of these? Yeah, sometimes you could sit down and tie 100 in just a few hours. And you can see just how simple that is. The only problem is you do tend to burn up quite a bit of peacock herl with this, so I do like to get the bigger packs. It just makes sense. Put a little bit more dubbing on the head. And if you wanted to, you could take and put like a hot spot right here. This would be an easy spot to put like a chartreuse underbody if you're concerned about high water, or you just wanted to throw something different. You know, those steelhead do like those hot colors. Especially it feels like when they first come out of the lake. Gosh, they're you know, kind of keyed in on like egg type colors and things like that. I don't like how that went on, but I can kind of fix it with some thread. Kind of got it too big of a clump. But when I take my hen saddle and just wrap over the top of that, it's going to even it out, and it's going to give it just a little bit more body on the front of that. Kind of pull those feathers back, create that little space right here to be able to tie in the thorax. And it's almost like a swimming nymph. If you think of like, oh, like Bob Clouser's swimming nymph, you know, it has that pheasant over the back of it. It's more of a tan color, but that swimming nymph is just a fish catching fly. And it's easy to tie. You know, I think in modern fly tying, everybody wants to add all these different steps. You know, honestly, it's probably just you're making the same fly, but just with multiple steps and different types of materials and calling it your own. I mean, this is definitely, you know, kind of cross with a sparrow almost with a thorax, you know, or like a swimming nymph. Any other questions?
Hop back on here. Yeah, we got some questions. Nope. There we go. I was muted.
All right.
Do you use these with a tandem rig often?
Absolutely. Yep. I'll put an egg in front of this.
From John.
And usually put this on the back. And in low clear water, I may just run a single fly, and this will be it. You know, highly pressured fish, and they're seeing egg after egg after egg, kind of feel like they need a change in diet. You know, I don't think people fish nymphs enough in the springtime. You know, everybody's like egg, 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 bead, 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 whatever. You know, you show them a nymph a lot of times, fish that hasn't seen that, and they've seen 5 million different colors of beads or eggs going over their head. They see something that's natural looking, that's already on their menu, they're going to take it. So I feel like people should fish nymphs more than what they do. And I think that's one of the things that can make you successful on rivers that are pretty busy. It's just like some buggy looking nymph that doesn't have too much flash in it, but that just kind of that right amount. It's dialed in.
Lee says, this is comment of the night so far, says, good job, Brian, just 197 more to go.
Yeah, and this is, I'm much more relaxed than I was last time doing this, just because of the stress of what was going on beforehand. It's nice to have everything dialed in. I have to applaud the efforts of Luke and Matt on these. You know, we had no idea what we were doing when we first started this, and we're out here, like I said, having fun with it, and you know, hoping to provide some good content for you guys to try at home, in things that we use, and you know, fish every day. So we thank you for tuning in.
Last one, and then we'll hit another fly, I think.
Sounds good.
And applause to David, because I wrote the same question down right here. So preference on running stonefly above an egg or a nymph above an egg or below?
I typically run my nymph directly off of my weight. So, or I'm sorry, my egg's going to come first in line, and then my nymph's always going to come into play in the back of that. And the reason why I feel that something buggier, whether it's a fry pattern, a stonefly, any sort of nymph, a hex nymph, a green caddis, when that fish comes around, and if they're following it whatsoever, or it starts to rise up, that whole lysing ring lift, right? So many times when you get to the very end of your swing, that's when you get your fish, whether you're swinging soft tackles, whether you're fishing steelhead, whether you're fishing, you know, spay flies, that end of the swing, whatever motion that is, where that starts to sweep up, that's usually when you get your bite. So definitely don't just end your drift. Like, always fish your drifts out wherever possible. If you don't have a log or anything down there, keep fishing that out, and sometimes let these nymphs hang for a second, especially in the springtime. I see that happen all the time. All right.
All right, we're good to start another fly.
All right,
thanks for the great questions.
Like I said, these are super easy patterns. Keep it simple. I was brought up on that moniker of keep the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid. I don't want to overcomplicate my life with anything more than I've already complicated it with to begin with, right? So when I sit down to tie, I'm going to tie super easy flies that I can just whip out. And the next one we're going to do is just a simple green caddis. And gosh, if there were two flies that I could take out for spring steelhead, it would be these two for sure. And then probably that fry pattern would be, those would be my top three that I would really focus on in the spring. In the more of the winter, that late winter, early spring, I might fish a lot more hex patterns, because I feel like the fish are still looking for those. They've been maybe down in those slower ends of the river, sitting down in some winter hole, just, you know, slowly feeding because their metabolism isn't very high, and they see that hex nymph and they'll take it. But you know, I don't really try and fish the hex nymphs a lot around the gravel. It just doesn't work as well. But the green caddis, again, if you catch a stick in the river, you'll see all these little case caddises. Like I had one the other day that must have had 50 of them on this stick, and we popped those out, Matt. Remember, we were pulling them apart. And this is what's inside of those, and there are lots of different variations of this caddis nymph out there, and you can tie this any way you want. And I'm going to show you just a couple of different ways to tie this pattern tonight. And I'm just going to add a little bit of thread to my hook, and I like to use a scud hook, and I'll tie these in typically 6s, 8s, and 10s. So I never leave home without a green caddis in my box. So I'm just using pearl core braid. So you can use lots of different things for this, but this particular one I'm going to fish maybe in low light conditions on a cloudy day. Maybe if I feel like the water is dirty and I just need that little bit of extra color in there. You know what they say, if it ain't chartreuse, it ain't no use. So the fish do key in on this chartreuse, and I'm just going to tie this in on the end and just wrap my thread forward. I mean, this, like, what could be easier than that, right? Two things in this recipe. I'm just going to wrap this forward. This is going to give me the segmentation. You know, 2 materials. What could be easier? Tie that off a couple times, and I have my caddis segment right there. And this, I would say, is like a high water green caddis. And again, peacock herl. So I'm going to build up ahead with some peacock herl. And we're going to call this one good after that. I mean, this is really, really just absolute meat and potatoes patterns. You know, fill your box with them. Go fish them with absolute confidence. I mean, seriously, tie up 100 of those in an evening and you're all set. You know, the green rockworm, whatever, it's killer. Perfect winter pattern. And I can use lots of different things for this. I could use vinyl rib, I can use diamond braid. This pearl braid I kind of like on my bigger ones because it gives it that body and it gives it like a natural segmentation look. If I wanted to increase durability of this particular pattern, I might go ahead and put wire over the front of that, but I'm not even going to worry about that step. Gosh, if I hook a fish on this and it comes unraveled, great. Cut it off, throw it in my trash can in the boat, and call it good. So there's another variation of this that we tied up for a long time, and we're gonna show you that one too. And gosh, this is dating back so many years, right? But it was using this pearl core diamond braid, and this is such a simple caddis, and it's so effective. It's really not even funny. But it's called the Viagra caddis, and it's literally just tying this in. This is when it's really late night and you don't have enough flies for the next day. Yeah. So I'm just going to tie that in, and then I'm going to take my peacock herl head. And this fishes absolutely amazingly well. I may not tie it on a 6 unless it's really high water, but this gives it some motion, thanks, that you don't get out of like your normal caddis. And then if you wanted to, you can just burn the end of this real quick. And there you go. That is your Viagra Caddis. So that's kind of a low water style. Like I said, if you really wanted to get it, this thing moves around. I don't know what it is about that little tag end floating around, but man, the steelhead do go after that. So there are two different styles of caddis that you can tie using this pearl core diamond braid. And again, I like that chartreuse color. You could tie these in a tan. You could tie them like scud style as well, but that's just a super iridescent. Love this in the, the spring kind of dirty water days. That iridescent color really shines through. It's pretty amazing. So those are my simple spring fill your box guide patterns. Fish those with confidence. Sit down, tie a couple hundred of them, and don't be afraid to lose them. Sometimes you gotta lose a few flies to catch a fish. Don't be afraid.
That's the truth. Definitely be willing to lose some flies.
Oh yeah, I think my record was 56 one day.
Oh my gosh.
That was like, oh
holy
man,
cow!
that was a rough one.
That's excessive. Okay, we got some.
But luckily, the fishing was really good that day too. So, but yeah, we're just fishing a lot of new water, a lot of tricky spots.
Lee says he's done real well with green caddis for kings as well in the fall.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep, any type of the migratory fish. It's a very multifunctional fly, but it's simple. 2 items in the recipe. It's like easier than making tacos.
Yeah, we get a lot of people that, and again, I'm been brainstorming a steelhead flies video and breaking it down. And I think people, they sometimes put too much attention into the fly. I'm a presentation person versus over the fly personally. I think there are times when the fly pattern matters.
Sure.
But I do think presentation over pattern.
Right. I mean, you can tie them in like this. You can make that length tail whatever you want. There's so much you can do with these flies. So I'm going to shorten that up a little bit and make just a different variation even.
Besides these two, what else do you have in your box for the spring?
Definitely lots of nuke eggs, lots of big yarn eggs, depending on the water clarity and the flows there. And I definitely, besides these two, gosh, flashback pheasant tails, those work really well. And of course, like some sort of steel or salmon smolt pattern. Don't leave home in the spring without a salmon smolt. It's by far and away, when those fish are keyed in on that, you can outfish anybody with eggs. It's probably, you'll see mergansers out eating on the surface, and you'll see trout starting to hit those right on the surface. That's when you see that surface activity. That's when you want to switch to some sort of steelhead or a salmon smolt pattern, because they rise right up in the water column, and I can make like a funky looking worm one like this. Anytime you have that caddis type body, kind of a variation, come down the hook, have a little bit more movement here, just get crazy with it. I think it's the key in right on that color. These little caddis nymphs, they leave that safety of their cocoon on this little tiny web, like this little filament to go out and feed, and they get washed away and they have to create a whole new cocoon, and they just become such easy food for these fish, especially in the high water with the springtime. Things get moved around with the spawning activity of the fish as they start to dig their tails in the red. They kick loose so many different nymphs and nutrients for these fish that it really becomes a buffet further down the river.
Lee is asking if you know of anyone that fishes scuds with any luck.
Absolutely.
In Michigan.
Yep.
He
for sure.
fished them a lot. It sounds like over in New Jersey for trout, and I did as well living out in Utah. Scuds were huge on the green.
You know, one of the things that we've seen in the rivers after zebra mussels and things like that, the rivers in Michigan became more clear. Our migratory fish rivers got these large weed beds, probably from people like golf courses or lawns or something from up higher in the system. All those fertilizers get caught down below, and we get some big grass mats. So if you dig around on those grass mats, you'll see like a million scuds. So absolutely, do not overlook scuds when you have those grass mats and you're fishing around those. Definitely a good and probably overlooked food source for steelhead as well. Yeah, that's why I said you could tie these in tan too.
Yeah.
You know.
Luke, you got any?
Maybe one more question. Do you ever throw a soft tackle collar on your caddis?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things, the boogie woogie caddis. So that is definitely something that I do like to add to it. In fact, I can tie one. There is a brown, speckled brown hen saddle over there. I'll get this thing loaded up, and I'll just do that one. We have done a video on it, but it was a long time ago before we had all this really great production stuff going, thanks to Matt.
We'll probably do another round of updated quality.
But we'll update some of those.
Some steelhead nymph time videos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to take this speckled brown. And again, you could use this on your stonefly if you're tying brown ones. So pretty easy just to do like kind of that Viagra style caddis with a soft tackle. Looks really pretty killer. And I burn this on the end just so that doesn't unravel completely while I'm fishing this. And again, I'll tie this in 6s, 8s, and 10s. You can go down to a 12 if you can find a hook strong enough. You know, even a 14, clear water, spooky fish. Don't be afraid to fish small flies. You know, those, especially the Great Lakes Steelhead, they have a lot of trout tendencies. And they will eat small nymphs. They're pretty lazy.
That reminds me, Ted has this great line on his website about fishing eggs and steelhead and stuff, and the best way to tell if you're fishing the right thing is if you're catching trout as well.
That's a very good point. Oh, you know what? I'll wrap this forward. Yeah, if the trout are keying in on what you're offering, that is a very good thing to take into account. So I kind of skipped a step there. I need to back this up. Forgot to put the collar on there. And this kind of looks like that cocoon. When it gets wet. You know, I can just kind of finish that off right there. But if you think about that caddis and it poking out of their cocoon, it's totally the way to go. And you can see, super simple. Sit down, tie a bunch of these. And once this gets wet, it really lays back and looks like it's kind of a Peking caddis. Think of those Peking caddis patterns.
We did have a question that kind of mirrors what we were talking about on the the stonefly is when to weight them. And again, it's all about, I think, your technique, because if your primary way of getting these flies down is going to be the weight on the fly, and you don't want to fishalize split shot, that's the way to do it. If you're fishing split shot, there's a reason we don't weight these flies a whole lot, because we don't want them necessarily riding on the bottom with the split shot, and you tend to lose a lot more flies that way. You want them actually to kind of be neutrally buoyant and sit above where those fish tend to suspend themselves in a feeding posture.
Absolutely.
Lee's asking how you did with browns below tippy this year. His experience was pretty minimal.
It was very minimal. They tend to be all gone.
You think that's water temperature? Do you think it's lamprey control?
I have no idea. I think the jury is still out on that. I don't know if it got too warm in the summer. It's really hard to say. There's some crazy theories out there on it, though. But again, these do not have to be perfect by any means. You know, like, these flies are for guides, you know. This is get them down, get them in front of the fish, have confidence in them.
And don't bat an eye when you lose it.
Don't bat an eye when you lose them. It's just a hook. So the faster and easier of a pattern that you have, that's still very effective, you know, you're not going to be afraid to put it in the log jam. You're probably going to catch more fish on it because you don't care. You know, you're going to take that risky cast, or, you know, put it extra deep under that tree branch or whatever it is. But yeah, steelhead guide flies, man. That's really where it's at. Simple, effective, and you know, easy to tie.
All right.
Any other questions?
Any other questions before we start to wrap things off and talk about next week and things like that?
Absolutely.
I'll just be the first to say Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas,
Happy holidays.
everyone. Thank you for your
so
business
much
support.
for your business this fall and supporting us, small local shops.
Right.
Keep
we were
on
able to
cranking,
give
yeah.
5 bikes away.
5 bikes away this fall with donations from customers, which is huge.
Yep.
Again, not to be a dead horse, but if you haven't done so, think about subscribing. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all that. We're going to be, now that we're going, you know, into winter here, we're going to be cranking out a lot more content. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more time to do that stuff, and a lot more people are going to be tying, including us. So should be fun.
I will say I've got one thing that I just thought of.
Yeah.
You know, on this pearl core braid, you can do, like, I just stripped out the inside of that. I was going to mention that and I forgot about it. So you can create a body just with the braided part. Think of like the Chinese finger puzzle thing. And that's it gives you a little bit thinner profile, but that same type of sparkle as you have with that regular pearl braid. And I'll kind of illustrate that real quickly with this one. You know, a lot of times you get so used to tying guide flies, right? You're just throwing materials on a hook. You just want to get that, you know, 2 dozen done or 3 dozen or whatever it is that you're tying. And so for me, it's difficult a lot of times to slow down, to think about like, oh, step by step, what am I doing here? You know, I'm just going to wrap this pearl braid right up. You know, I don't worry about the bobbin cradle. It's going to take that thread right against it. You know, so that gives me a little bit different profile, if you look at that, compared to, let's say, the thick body on this one. I don't know if you can see that, but the difference between the two. It's still going to give it that real shiny profile, but if you wanted more of a low water, or maybe if I'm tying them on a size 10, I don't need that bulk of the core on the inside of that braid. And then just tie in the head. You know, we all like to have really beautiful flies in our box and things like that. And there's like definitely a time and a place for that. You know, but for me, it's something that's just simple and easy to tie like this. That's the way I go. So, that's my PS. Try this one.
All right. We're just going to go ahead and wrap this up. So be sure, remember, you can come back and rewatch this and follow along with Brian and tie your own. But we love doing this because there's an opportunity to answer questions. And we got one last question.
Sure.
John asks about the distance between flies in a tandem rig. He was asking about something about 3 inches, which is really, really close.
Oh, that's really close. Yeah, I would, you know, depending on the depth of my river, I may run, I don't know, 30 inches, 24 inches. I'm definitely going to put them further apart than like that. You know, I'm going to have them spread out.
Sure, I see. I mean, usually for me, minimum 18.
Yeah, it might even be like 4 feet to my next. You know, it just depends. Depends on the conditions. Depends on if I need to really get that fly down. And if I'm fishing an indicator, it's going to be closer than if I'm drift fishing, for example. So, you know, I don't want to have too long of a rig on my indicator because I have so much weight already down with a float. You go to land that fish, it could be really cumbersome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm tying next week. We're doing dry flies, actually.
Woo,
so
dry flies.
Break out the hackle. That'll be fun. We're going to do some stuff with moose body, CDC, deer hair, hackle. Should be fun. I'm going to have up that materials list this weekend, I promise you.
Really?
And there will be a coupon so you can buy those materials at a discount and tie along. It'll be awesome. We'll try and get them to you as ASAP.
Like we don't have enough on our plate right now.
I know. But we want people to get their materials. So,
absolutely.
Peter says Merry Christmas. So, you know, that's perfect segue. We got some great other tires coming up. We got Corey Golden. We got Johnny Ray. We got Evan. We've got our friend Tommy, who's going to tie a really unique tube fly platform for pike fishing. So big tubes, big flash, big feathers.
Is Eddie doing something too?
Eddie's doing a game changer.
Ooh, we had a lot of people asking about the game changer.
Into that, which is really exciting. He's gonna prep a lot of stuff, so we're not spending 3 hours building this thing. But I'm sure he ties these, you know, production style, like a bunch of tails, a bunch of.
I'm sure it still takes him 2 hours to tie one.
And they're beautiful.
They are work of art. Unlike these.
Every Wednesday, guys, we'll be tying live all winter long. Thanks again for all the business. Merry Christmas. Hope you're